This is the 34th lesson in the book of Judges. And I want you to open your Bibles to Judges chapter 19 and have your finger there ready on verse number 10. Now, I want to catch you up on where we were and where we ended up from the last lesson. A Levite had gone up and was living in the town in the area of Ephraim, and he had taken a concubine for a wife. Now, a concubine is a second or third wife or something like that, usually taken for the purpose of having children. And in the midst of the life and the marriage of that Levite with that concubine in the area of Ephraim, something happened and the concubine left. Her husband was unfaithful to him and went back home to daddy. And after about 4 months, the Levite man decided, hey, I'm going to go get my wife. And he goes down to daddy's house, and daddy is ecstatic that the husband is here. And they come in. In fact, the concubine lets him in the house. Evidently, all is tender and is made up well, and everything happens just as it should happen. And as it's time to go back to Ephraim, he's going to take the concubine back with him. And the father-in-law just keeps making him stay. He likes this Levite guy. He likes him a lot. And so what happens is, over and over as the Levite tries to leave, he is detained by the father-in-law to stay another day, to stay another day, to stay another day, to stay another day. That happens over and over and over again. And so we read that passage in verses 3 through 9, a rather long passage about this hanging on. And what's kind of interesting, the interpretation that there must have been an argument that caused the concubine to be unfaithful to the Levite seems to be the most plausible reason why she went home to daddy. And the Levite sought to bring her back, and it said he did it with tender words. In addition, the concubine's father seemed to be thrilled by this Levite's presence in Bethlehem and wanted this Levite to stay until all the issues were resolved with his daughter. And the father did it, all he could to keep that Levite there until all the problems were resolved and his daughter would return to her marriage with her husband there in Ephraim. Well, with that, the sad part of this story is now going to be revealed next. We come to the invitation to spend the night in the old man's home. This old man knows the sin that is in the city of Gibeah. And it's a city where he was in and he was working as a visiting worker because he was also from the area of Ephraim. You see, Gibeah is in the tribal area of Benjamin. But this old man is down in Gibeah in Benjamin, and he has a genuine concern when this Levite man who leaves with his concubine late in the day ends up staying in Gibeah for the night. We pick this up in verse number 10. But the man was not willing to spend the night. So he arose and departed. We're talking about not willing to spend the night with his father-in-law. He's ready to go. So he departed to a place opposite Jebus. And there were with him a pair of saddle donkeys. His concubine also was with him. And when they were near Jebus, the day was almost gone, and the servant said to his master, please come and let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. However, the master said to him, we will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who are not of the sons of Israel, but we will go on as far as Gibeah. And he said to his servant, come and let us approach one of these places, and he will spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. So they passed along, and they went their way. And the sun set on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there in order to enter and lodge in Gibeah. And when they entered, they sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night. Then behold, an old man was coming up from the field from his work at evening. Now the man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was staying in Gibeah. But the men of the place were Benjamites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, where are you going, and where do you come from? And he said to him, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim. For I am from there, and I went to Bethlehem in Judah. But I am now going to my house, and no man will take me into his house. Yet there is both straw and fodder for our donkey, and also bread and wine for me, your maidservant, and your young man who is with your servants. There is no lacking of anything. The man said, Peace to you. Only let me take care of all your needs. However, do not spend the night in the open square. So he took him into his house and gave the donkey fodder, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. Now let's back up to the city of Jebus that's mentioned here. It was on the border of the tribal land of Judah and Benjamin, right on the border. In fact, it's about 5 miles from Bethlehem. Half of the city was in Judah, half of the city was in Benjamin. The divide between them was a valley or a ravine. Israelites of Judah lived in the city on Judah's side, but the Canaanites controlled the Jebusite side over in the Benjamin land, who lived over there in that great Jebusite citadel over in Benjamin's tribal area. It was a sinful, godless city that the nation of Israel was unable to take and destroy when the promised land was taken by the nation of Israel under Joshua. Neither did the Benjamites take the city and destroy it and its occupants as ordered by the Lord when Joshua sent the tribes home to their tribal areas to complete that order. The Levite was right not to want to spend the night in Jebus. Gibeah was just up the road a few miles north of Jebus. Ramah was just a little further than Gibeah from Jebus. Now the old man in this passage was in Gibeah because he was working in the fields. He was from Ephraim. No doubt he was staying in a rented house in Gibeah. Now when he saw this Levite and his servants and the concubines sitting out in the open square of the city to camp out for the night, the old man had genuine concern for these three. No doubt he knew of the evil, sinful men that were living in the city who came to the square at night to take advantage of traveling men camping in the square. Notice I said take advantage of the men. These godless men did not care if the man was a Levite or an ordinary Israelite. They did not care if the man was a foreigner. Their heart was set on sexual relationships with male flesh, and they sought it nightly in the square. This old man offered his home to protect the Levite and his companions. No doubt, the Levite and his companions had already been spotted in the square before the old man was able to get them into his house. The grapevine ran quick, and all these godless men gathered to assault this Levite man and his companion men sexually. They followed them to the old man's house, and they knocked on the door. And the sad story continues with the old man giving the invitation to spend the night with the Levite's concubine and his daughter outside, and to stay away from the Levite and his male servants inside. Verse number 20. And while they were celebrating, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding the door. And they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him. Then the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said to them, No, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly, since this man has come into my house. Do not commit this act of folly. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out, that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish. But do not commit such an act of folly against this man. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her all night until morning, then let her go at the approach of dawn. And as the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the man's house where her master was, until full daylight. We do not need to repeat the story. It would only add to the disturbing tale that we have already read. However, there are two things that we cannot discern from the text. We do not know if the old man's daughter was sent out the door to be used by the vile men of Gibeah. Next, we do not know if it was the old man or the Levite who actually seized the concubine and forced her out the door. We don't know who it was. But perhaps both the virgin daughter and the concubine were sent out together. But we are not told that, so we don't know. It seems that the virgin daughter was not sent out because there is no mention of her fate at the end of the night as the morning dawns. Now when the sun had risen, the Levite opened the door to find his concubine dead. What did the Levite do? He did something so horrifying that he successfully garnered the full attention of all the tribes of the nation of Israel to finally do something about sin in Israel. We hear the people of the tribes of Israel give the invitation to speak up against this evil found in Gibeah in verse number 27 with what the Levite does. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, then behold, his concubine was laying at the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up and let's go." But there was no answer. Then he placed her on the donkey, and the man arose and went to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine and cut her in 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, "Nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up." Now I want you to know, being a Levite, he was trained in slaughtering animals for sacrifices on the altar of worship. Now, but in reality, in those days, the slaughter of animals for food was taught to every male, and it was not considered a gruesome task as we might think today. Today, only professional butchers and hunters dress animals regularly. But back in that day, in the day of this story, all males in a household dressed animals this way. However, the dressing of a human was not common. The Levite knew how to dress her out in the slaughter because of what he knew about animals. He also knew that if he sent a piece of her around to every tribe, it would send a message to the whole nation and to generate a great concern about the homosexual men in Gibeah of the tribe of Benjamin. And it did. And we will learn about that response from the nation in this next chapter. And that takes us to chapter number 20. And after the Levite's priest sent a different part of his dead concubine's body to each tribe in the promised land, all of a sudden, the ungodly nation for all these years since the death of Joshua came to their senses and became moral for once. We see a nation's defense of the law of the Lord, the law, followed in the people's actions, but not in the hearts of the people. The shocked nation called for the gathering of all the nation to examine and have an examination of what actually had taken place. They were shocked. Oh, in their heads they did the law, but in their hearts they did not. But what this Levite did with this concubine's body shocked them and brought them to their senses. Chapter 20, verse 1. Then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. And the sons of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wickedness take place?" So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. But the men of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me. Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. And I took hold of my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance. For they have committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel Behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here. Had the writer not told us about the tribe of Dan expanding all the way up to the northern tip of the promised land in chapter 18, this part of verse 1 would not have made sense. It says, then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba. If we did not have the previous story, this verse would have been interpreted through the years to mean that the area from Dan down to Beersheba. But with the previous story revealed before this story, we know that the writer is telling us that the sons of Israel were talking about from the northernmost point of the promised land, all called Dan, all the way down to the southernmost point of the promised land called Beersheba. All gathered together, all for a meeting. But these were just cities. You see, Dan, these were cities. Dan was a city, Beersheba was a city. To be accurate, talking about Beersheba and about Dan, there were other cities, villages I should say, further down in the promised land that looked to Beersheba. And there were other villages up in the north that looked to Dan, the city there, for protection and for shelter and for sustenance in difficult times. And if you remember back when Joshua was dividing the promised land to the tribes, the major landmarks were named as the cities with their villages. The cities were named, but the villages were not. Therefore, in this first part of this verse, the writer has correctly stated that the word sent out to assemble to the whole nation of Israel on the west side of the Jordan River, from the major city to the north, in the north, to the major city in the south. The writer goes on to reveal that the summons included the land of Gilead. That's going to be important. Gilead was on the other side of the Jordan River. So he's saying, we even sent word over there to the whole nation of Israel. Why does that tell us? Why does this writer tell us that the summons went even to the land of Gilead? It is here that the writer is making sure that we know this summons for the men to come to Mizpah was explicitly sent also to the people in Gilead, so no one in Gilead would have an excuse for not coming to meet at the meeting. We will see the importance of this statement in the last chapter of the book of Judges. In other words, Samuel, as he has been doing all the way through this book, is setting us up for what is coming. He's not just telling the story once and coming back and telling it again and telling it again. He's giving us the details to know what's coming. So moving on, the writer also told us in this passage where the meeting took place. It took place in Mizpah. At least 4 villages in the Old Testament existed with the name Mizpah. Now we can identify them as Mizpah in the land of Gilead, Mizpah in the land of Moab, Mizpah in the land of Mizpah, which is in the Hittite territory way north part of the Promised Land, and on the western side of the Jordan River, and also Mizpah in the land of Benjamin. So because the writer tells us that the nation included the land of Gilead in the central area on the east side of the Jordan River, it could have been Mizpah over there in Gilead. However, because the offense took place in the tribal area of Benjamin, and everybody was told that, it makes more sense that the nation met at Mizpah in the land of Benjamin. And the writer is simply stating that the Israelites from the eastern side of the Jordan River joined with them in the meeting. And even with that, we cannot make a hard and fast statement about which Mizpah the men were to gather. But it just seems best that it was the one in Benjamin. When the leaders met in Mizpah, they came prepared. Did you see that? The writer tells us that their combined army was 400,000 foot soldiers with swords. Let's stop for a moment, and I want us to analyze the population of the tribe of Benjamin. Now get this. In Numbers chapter 26, now we're talking 300 plus years before, actually right at 400 years before. Moses took a second census at the end of his life, just before Joshua took over as the leader. And the tribe of Benjamin had 45,600 men who could wield a sword. Age 20 and up, they could fight. Not the invalid, not the men, not the women. That was a little more than almost 300, almost 400 years before in the story. So at the beginning of the book of Exodus, back in Numbers chapter 21, it tells us that Benjamin had 35,400. Well, from 35,400 in 40 years to 45,600, that's a growth of 28% in 40 years. If that held true for the next 300 and something years, Benjamin had grown at 28% compounded through the years to about 200,000 men in the tribe. A number that size could be a best case scenario with a compounded growth of 28% over this time. But when we reach verse 14, we learn that growth over those years may not have happened. The tribe of Benjamin may have shrunk by about 9,000 men or so over those years. You remember, these are generations dying off, being born and dying off, famines coming, being born and dying off. This is not one group of people from the time of Joshua on. These are different people. Nevertheless, in either case, the army of Israel should have been able, with 400,000 men, to take Benjamin's army without difficulty, even if they were 200,000 men. But at the meeting at Mizpah, the leaders examined the Levite who divided his concubine and sent his pieces throughout the tribes, and let it be said and understood that the Levite was successful in his plan to expose the great unchecked sexual sin occurring in the nation, but culminating in the unnatural sexual sins in the town of Gibeah in the tribal area of Benjamin. By the way, those sexual sins, unnatural sexual sins, were part of the worship of false gods. After hearing the testimony of the Levite, the determination was made that because the tribe of Benjamin had allowed these unnatural sexual desires of men in Gibeah to go unchecked, no one would return home until the evil in Benjamin's land had been corrected. Verse number 8. Then all the people arose as one man, saying, not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. And we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000 to supply food for the people, that when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, they may punish them for all the disgraceful acts that they have committed in Israel. Thus all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united as one man. What did the leaders of Israel do in this passage? What do all these numbers mean? The wording in English is a little challenging to follow, but let me tell you, its meaning is very simple. 400,000 soldiers were at the meeting. And back in those days, when people made a journey, they planned how long they would be gone, and they would carry their own food supplies. But no doubt, the call to come to the meeting in Mizpah did not include a length of time for the meeting. So the men came with enough supplies for the short meeting and a return home. They did not know that it was going to last 4 months. We don't know that in the story yet, but we'll find it out later. So in this case, no one was going home until the disgraceful acts allowed in Benjamin's land were corrected. Therefore, the soldiers would need supplies. The numbers in this passage signify the Hebrew way of saying 10% of the soldiers were assigned to collecting and providing food for the 90% who would be fighting against Benjamin. The math is simple. 10 out of 100, 100 out of 1,000, 1,000 out of 10,000, that's 10%. 10% would supply the food. Israel had 400,000 soldiers. 40,000 of them were to scour the land, surrounding areas of the town, and gather food and bring it back. The remaining 360,000 soldiers would be engaging in battle against Benjamin. Now, the writer tells us of the mobilization of Israel's plan. Israel would reach out to the tribe of Benjamin to do the right thing and deliver the sinful men so that those sinful men could receive the death penalty for their sin. Watch what they say in verse number 12. Then the tribe of Israel sent men through the entire tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What is this wickedness that has taken place among you? Now then, deliver up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove this wickedness from Israel." But the sons of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the sons of Israel. The sons of Benjamin gathered from the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the sons of Israel. And from the cities on that day the sons of Benjamin were numbered, 26,000 men who draw the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah who were numbered, 700 choice men. Out of all these people, 700 choice men were left-handed. Each one could sling a stone at a hare and not miss. Then the men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered, 400,000 men who draw the sword. All these were men of war.